From the studios of WTVJ in Miami, Florida, comes a special program in accordance with the code of the National Association of Radio and Television Broadcasters. This full-hour program, devoted to the gubernatorial candidate, Acting Governor Charlie Johns, and Senator Leroy Collins, is presented as a public service. WTVJ has invited radio stations throughout the entire state of Florida to carry this special debate. The opinions of program participants are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinion of this station's management.
Good evening, everybody. This is Ralph Rennick welcoming you to another edition of What's the Story. Florida, as you know, is approaching the climax of a turbulent political drama. Two men are campaigning for votes in a May 25th runoff election, which will decide who will serve the last 2 years of the unexpired term of the late Governor Dan McCarty. Tonight, for the first time, these two candidates are meeting to discuss and debate the issues of the campaign. Our guests are Leroy Collins of Tallahassee on my left, a state senator with an 18-year record in the legislature, and Charlie E. Johns of Stark, who, as president of the state senate, currently serves as acting governor of Florida. On tonight's program, acting Governor Johns and Senator Collins will be asked questions by our regular interrogators, Dr. Don Larson, chairman of the government department at the University of Miami, and Bill Baggs, columnist for the Miami Daily News. Well, now, gentlemen, let's get down to business. And first, let me explain my role in tonight's program. The public interest dictates that both sides receive fair and impartial treatment. Thus, we will now put into effect a set of ground rules. Now, each of you gentlemen will have a maximum of 2 minutes in which to reply to questions asked by Dr. Larson and Mr. Baggs. At the end of that time, this buzzer will sound. That means time is up. And if you have any further points to debate on that subject, you will each be given the opportunity to talk further, but a 1-minute time limit will then go into effect. And now on with the program, and who's the first with a question, Don?
Ralph, Mr. Rennie, could I make a statement before the program starts here, rather preliminary to it?
An opening statement, Senator?
Well, I'd just like to comment on the meeting and express my appreciation for the fact that the...
Get off, make everybody happy at the very beginning. If the Senator makes an opening statement and you make one, will that be acceptable?
Anything.
Opening statement by each candidate, and start with Senator Collins.
Well, I just wanted to express my appreciation of the fact that the acting governor has finally agreed to participate in a joint meeting of this kind. I regret that he was unwilling to participate in many offers for meetings in the first primary when Mr. Odom was also a candidate. I've been reading the last few days some of the rather vicious, scurrilous advertising that's been taking place in the Miami Herald here in regard to this approaching meeting. And I was amazed when I came into the studio tonight out on the streets to pick up a copy of tomorrow morning's Miami Herald to find that the meeting had already been held. I just wanted to ask the acting governor something about this. Now, here's a copy of tomorrow morning's Herald. And it's an official advertisement by acting Governor Johns. And he says, proof that truth is mightier than the syrupy mouthings. Governor Johns' direct talk to the people of Dade wins wide support. Now, this is in the morning's paper, not this morning. Well, Senator Collins, wherever you are, we told you what would happen. You asked for it on television last night, and you got it. You didn't look so good, Senator, did you? Neither did your record when it was put up against that of Governor Johns, did it? Governor Johns would much rather have left you to your own devices and let the public discover for itself exactly what you are. But you wanted to get on television. Well, you got your wish, didn't you? We hope you're satisfied now, Senator. And that's the sort of advertising that's been prepared and run in a local paper 2 hours before the meeting is held, and I find that I'm already convicted.
All right, Senator Collins, acting Governor Johns.
Not have anything to do with any advertisement. I'm not to start with, I didn't know anything about any advertisement that's going to be put in the paper, because that's not Charlie Johns, and the citizens of Florida know it's not Charlie Johns. But I've carried on a good, clean, decent thing, and Leroy knows it. And I want to say again that I've heard Leroy say that in his heart he felt like he could make the citizens of Florida a good governor. Well, when I was sworn in as acting governor of this state...
Governor, your time is up. We'll get back in a moment. Senator, you've each had 2 minutes. We can continue this if you want to go on a minute-by-minute basis.
I'd just like to ask a simple question. If he repudiates the people who are putting this kind of advertising in the Miami newspapers, from what he said then, I'd judge that that may be what he's implying.
I've got somebody handling my advertisement. I can't okay every ad that's put in the Miami Herald or any other paper. I've got to depend on somebody to do that for me, just like you have.
I'm showing you now where your advertising writers have written up a book on a meeting that had never even been held, and it's reminiscent somewhat of that action that you took in removing all of those McCarty appointees without giving them the courtesy of any hearing. Perhaps that's your nature, to judge and then before any hearing or any opportunity of anybody else to be heard on the subject.
Mr. Moderator, when I can say something, I don't want to interrupt.
No,
Leroy.
You have a minute now, Governor.
Well, when you talk about removing those McCarty appointees, when I investigated and found out the things they was doing, just like grass seed Dick Simpson, selling the state of Florida 50,000 pounds of Pensacola Bahia grass seed at $34.70 a hundred when they could buy it at a considerable cheaper price, I'm certainly going to remove them. And I'd do it again, but they say, why didn't I give them a hearing? Well, Senator, I removed them. My investigators found out this about what they was doing to the taxpayers of this state, and I removed them. Well, what would have been the use of me giving them a hearing? Then you would have said I was the one to remove them and then the judge. And you know as good as I do that the Constitution provides them a hearing when the Senate meets next year. And that's when they will be given a hearing. But I felt like it would be an injustice to remove them and hear them also when my mind was already made up on the type of appointments that they were.
All right, Governor John.
You thought it would be an injustice to those men to give them an opportunity to be heard when you leveled charges that assassinated their characters and their reputations?
When I was the one that brought those charges, I certainly do.
Well, why
Leroy.
did you give that sheriff over there in Baker County the courtesy of a hearing when you preferred some charges against him?
Well, that was a different proposition.
I understand.
Gentlemen, now let's get on with the questioning. Don, I believe you had a query at the beginning of the program.
Well, I wanted to say before my first question, Ralph, that I speak only for myself and, of course, do not represent the University of Miami in any sense on this show. I would like to ask each of these gentlemen a question that they've raised themselves. Each of you has challenged the other as being a representative of special interests. Each, on the other hand, has claimed that he represents all the people. Starting with Senator Collins, I'd like to ask you what your answer is to the charge of leaning in the direction of special interests.
2 minutes.
Well, the special interests I've represented in the legislature over all the years are indicated by my record there. And those special interests have been the children of Florida and the sponsorship of legislation dealing with the promotion of education in this state, the health of the citizens of Florida, sound conservation programs in this state, and program after program that has helped build and develop the opportunities of all the people of this state. Those have been my special interests. Now, the suggestion has been made that because I'm a lawyer and because I've represented legal clients, I suppose that's the basis for indicating any reference to special interest on my part. Well, any good lawyer represents all kinds of big and little clients, and my firm has represented some big clients and some medium-sized ones and some little ones. We represent the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, and we represent churches, and we represent some big corporations. But in no sense has any legal representation on my part affected my public work and my public record, and is backed up by the record itself. It's backed up by the fact that over and over the newspaper men who've covered the legislature have selected me the outstanding senator, something that I'm humbly grateful for and appreciative of. But I say to you, Dr. Larson, that there's nothing there to justify any implication that there have been any relationships or are any relationships of mine with any special interest, if you're talking about business interests, that could in any sense interfere with my ability, my capacity, my character and integrity to do a fine and a good job as governor. And I'm proud of the fact that Braley Odom, while he questioned that special interest thing, he said in Tampa before a large group down there publicly that he didn't in any sense question Leroy Collins' character or integrity, that he regarded Leroy Collins as one of the cleanest men ever to serve in the state Senate. I appreciate that very much. And after all, it comes down basically to a question of character and integrity.
All right. Acting Governor Johns.
Can I ask Leroy a question?
Governor, I think before we get to the question stage, Don, you want to reply?
I would like to reply to the basic question, if you would, Mr. Johns.
Well, Mr. Larson, my record in the legislature is an open book. I have always represented the little man in the state legislature. I've always served on the Labor Committee in the Senate. I've helped pass the 1935 session of the legislature the Workmen's Compensation Act. That was the first piece of legislation that Labor ever, first victory they won in the state, and ever since then I've helped amend the Workmen's Compensation Act, the Unemployment Insurance Act, and any legislation pertaining to the man that has to make his living by the sweat of his brow. And that's my legislative record. I don't represent any large clients. I'm in the insurance business, in the ice business, and I have a little small motel there at Stark. And I don't represent a lot of big clients in the state of Florida like Leroy does.
All right. That's the answer to that question. Now, do you have any points to raise on that, either of you gentlemen?
I'd like to ask the acting governor a few questions, and I'd be glad for him to ask me any questions he
Go
wants
right
to.
ahead.
I'd like to ask him whether or not he was representing these little people in respect to numerous votes he's cast in the legislature, and I've made these statements out on the stump behind his back, and I don't hesitate to make them to his face. I'd like to ask him if he was representing the little people, these people he's so interested in 1947 when he voted against the minimum foundation school law. I'd like to ask him if
Will you let me answer one at a time?
Acting Governor Johns.
Senator, I have explained that a number of times about me voting against the minimum foundation program. The school teachers of my county was against the minimum foundation program. They was afraid of it, and it defranchised at least 95 or 98% of my people, including myself, from ever being a candidate for county school superintendent, because one of the requirements of that bill was that you had to have a college education to be eligible to run for county school superintendent. And I tried to amend it to take that provision out of the bill, but I couldn't do it. And later, the Supreme Court of our state upheld my contention because they declared that portion of the bill unconstitutional. And
Well, the time is up on that one point. Now you have a minute, Senator Collins. That's the way the ground rules are operating.
So basically you were more concerned with the matter of who was elected and how he was elected to county superintendent than you were in improving the standard of education and the educational opportunity that the children of your county would have under the broad and great provisions for improvement that were included in that minimum foundation law.
Senator, I'd like to ask you who drafted that minimum foundation bill. Who was responsible for it?
Well, the Citizens Committee on Education was appointed by the governor. I think it originated in Governor Holland's administration, but Governor Caldwell carried that committee on. And that committee engaged the services of Mr. Edgar Morfitt and also at times the services of a Dr. Johns at the university. I understand he's no relation of yours. But
During
that committee...
campaign, I'd like to claim kin with you.
that committee, with the assistance of those men, actually did the preparation. I sat in on numerous conferences they had, but the law was prepared in advance of the legislature and was submitted, as you know, to the legislature. It had little support at the start, but we got more and more as we went along, and I'm glad of the fact that by the time the last roll call was made, that every member of the state legislature voted for it, with the single exception of yourself.
Well, in other words, you admit, Senator, that you wasn't author of that minimum foundation bill like you have claimed, or like you have intimated to the citizens of Florida.
I have never claimed or intimated that I authored the minimum foundation law. I have modestly taken considerable pride in the fact that I gave perhaps the strongest leadership that anybody gave in the state legislature to its enactment, and I would agree to that. Wouldn't you?
I think all the senators, but myself probably, that supported that. Just like you said, all of them voted for it, but I think all of them, there's other senators in there that gave leadership to it.
Gentlemen, let's move on to a question by Mr. Baggs. We haven't heard from him yet this evening.
Well, I've been sitting down out in right field, just listening, Ralph. To me, I've raised in the 3 previous gubernatorial forums here one question. It's been my first question, and I again want it raised tonight because I think it is one of the most important questions insofar as Dade County is concerned. My question has to do with reapportionment. As both of you gentlemen know, down here in Dade County, we have about 20% of the state population and about 3% of the legislators in the state legislature. I know most of the work, or a good bit of it, must be done by the state legislature, but I would like to know how both of you candidates stand on this issue, which I think is important today. Do you favor a reapportionment or not?
And on our rotation system, we'll begin this time with Acting Governor John.
Mr. Baggs, the Constitution says that the state of Florida shall be reapportioned every 10 years. And as governor of this state, when the legislature meets in 1955, I certainly intend to put in my message that I'm going to require the state legislature at that session to reapportion our state, and I'm going to call on them for what the Constitution. I'm going to tell them what the Constitution says, and I'm going to require them, as governor of this great state, that they reapportion according to the dictates of the Constitution.
All right, now to Senator Collins.
Well, I have advocated in this campaign from the beginning a very broad plan of general constitutional revision, and I've stated very frankly in my platform and in my printed literature and in my public statements that I favored, as a part of that broad constitutional revision, reapportionment of representation in the legislature. I agree that the more populous areas of this county are entitled to additional representation. And I think that the legislature should accomplish that either through a general plan of revision, as I advocate, and if that is not successful, then of course it should be followed up by a proceeding directly to revise that part of the Constitution independently. I'd like to ask the acting governor on that point a question, if I may.
You have 1 minute and 10 seconds left, Senator.
I'd like to ask him if he sanctions advertising that has been published in papers in North Florida in which his position was stated in opposition to reapportionment, and advertising that was in opposition to Leroy Collins because Leroy Collins had expressed favor for reapportionment. I think we ought to take the same position in all parts of the state.
Acting Governor John?
Leroy, that's what I have. I don't believe in talking out of both sides of my mouth. And the fact of the matter, I haven't even mentioned my stand anywhere in the state of Florida as to how I stand on reapportionment, and you know I haven't. And some of my supporters may have made some stand or some suggestion on reapportionment, But you haven't heard Charlie John say one word.
Well, let's
get
clear then.
Acting Governor Johns, are you through with that statement?
Well, the senator's interrupted me.
Well,
you still have 30 seconds, sir.
So, I would like to know what you're talking about.
Well, do you actually favor reapportionment, or is your response limited to what you do so far as calling the legislature into session or keeping the legislature in session if you happen to be governor?
I feel we should reapportion the state of Florida, just like the Constitution calls for, Senator Leroy.
Well, in a reapportionment plan, do you feel that the more populous areas of the state should get additional representation in the state legislature?
I feel like they're entitled to it. Just like in South Florida here, I have given Dade County in South Florida more during the 7 months that I have been governor than any other governor in the history of our state. I've shown them more recognition. I realize what this section of Florida means to the people of this state. I've given them a chairman of the Turnpike Commission. I've given them a hotel commissioner, a man that was a former president of the National Hotel Association. Got nearly $6 million in the budget for new roads and bridges in Dade County. Not only Dade County, but all over the state of Florida. I've shown what I think about this section of the state, Leroy.
Bill Baggs, you have a question?
Well, I just want this clearly understood because it's so vital to me, to Dade County. Both of you gentlemen then favor reapportionment. And both of you, if elected governor, will use the office of the governor to guide and direct reapportionment.
Mr. Baggs, as governor of Florida when the legislature meets in 1955, I'm sworn to uphold and defend and protect the Constitution of our state. And the Constitution says we shall reapportion every 10 years. So I'm going to have to insist that the legislature reapportion this state.
Senator Collins, your reply to Mr. Baggs' question.
Well, my reply is yes. As I remember his question, he just wanted a reiteration of whether or not we favor reapportionment. My answer is just yes.
Bill, don't you mean will they take active leadership to move reapportionment towards additional representation for the more populous areas?
Yes, I think both of you gentlemen understood that.
I'll take leadership as governor of this state.
I question that he'll take leadership as governor because I don't think he's going to be governor then, but I'm glad to get his position clarified.
All right, let's get on with another question. Don, do you have one ready?
Yes, I'd like to follow out my plan of using the words of each of these gentlemen rather than to frame questions of my own because I might be accused of being unfair the other way. I'd like to turn from one to the other as we go along, and I think one of the most prominent charges the Collins forces have made against you, Governor Johns, has to do with payroll padding. I understand from the paper that they've charged you with padding the state payroll in the amount of about $630,000 monthly, and that this extravagance, as they put it, has been for political purposes. What would be your answer to that charge?
As I get your question, you're going to direct one point to Acting Governor Johns and another one
yes,
to Senator Collins.
That's correct, if I may.
You want to start with Acting Governor Johns. All right.
Well, Dr. Lawson, my answer to that is that I have a letter here signed by Mr. R.G. Higgins, General Auditor of Mr. Clarence Guest, dated May the 7th, 1954. Says, Honorable Charlie E. Johns, Acting Governor, Captain. Dear Sir, pursuant to your recent request, we furnish you herewith the following statement of total salary for all 11 departments under the Governor as of September 1953 and as of April 1954. Total salaries as of September 1953 are $1,516,740.29. Total salaries as of April 1954 are $1,646,619.02. You will note from the above that there has been an overall increase of $139,878.73 for the departments under the Governor's office. Of this amount, the major increase is represented by increased salaries for the State Road Department totaling $134,913.70, leaving approximately $5,865.03 increase for the remaining departments. I understand from the Road Department officials that the increase granted lower-paid employees. Now, this is where we raise the lower-paid employees that making $150, $160 a month and wasn't making up to $200 a month, $15 a month. We raised them a little $15 a month increase. That amounted to approximately $55,000 to $75,000. A similar comparison of the 6 of the major departments not under the jurisdiction of the governor indicates total salary increases from $491,337.61 for September 1953 to $661,813.51 for April 1954, or a net increase of $170,475.90. Well, that makes the governor, Leroy there, his first statement, he's out of balance $312,121.27. Now he's charged me with $360,000, and he's out of balance $510,121.27.
All right, Acting Governor John. Dr. Larson, do you have another point to raise?
No,
or you gentlemen?
I should like to have
Let's continue on
Senator
this
Collins
on a
on this.
minute basis.
No,
I think he has 2 minutes to answer this,
You
too.
want to throw the same
Yes.
question to Senator
Yes.
Collins, all right?
I have, since the beginning of this campaign, pointed out that the acting governor was developing in Florida a political machine that had all of the ugly byproducts of political machines, and one of those basic byproducts is payroll padding. Now, I mean by payroll padding putting people on the payrolls and paid by the state at the taxpayer's expense who were not there serving a useful purpose and a sound and good purpose for the public good. I have information from the controller that shows that the payroll cost of the state of Florida increased from the last month of the McCarty administration to the past month of the acting governor's administration, $632,000, and I have a telegram supporting that in my hand. The increase in the State Road Department alone was $134,013.70. I realize, of course, that some of that general state expense were not in departments over which the governor had direct control, but I point out to him that he's the man who sets the pattern and the tone of state government, and he's the man in the strongest position of leadership of anybody in the state government. And I say that in the departments under his control, he has not set a pattern and a tone that would give leadership for sound economy in the whole fabric of our state government, as I think a governor's responsibility is. Now, I'd like to call specific instances where I regard employees have been put on the payroll that constitute payroll padding. For example, I have here in my hand an advertisement of a big political rally held at 4 p.m. at the east end of Gandy Bridge on May the 1st, and it's a free fish fry honoring Governor Charlie E. Johns. Everybody welcome. See and hear J. Hardin Peterson. J. Hardin Peterson is Florida's representative in Washington, D.C., and was appointed by acting Governor Charlie Johns. J. Hardin Peterson is a former congressman from the state of Florida and a fine man, but he accepted a job under the acting governor to do liaison work.
All right, now we'll turn to the acting governor for a minute.
Friends of the television audience, the Leroy didn't read you all of that telegram. And I'd like to, I know I haven't got a time to read it, but I have a copy of the same telegram here. You have asked whether or not any of these increases are chargeable to seasonal changes.
That is not in my telegram.
Well, I'm going to read the telegram to me. At your request, the following information is transmitted to you. The total increase in all 11 departments under the governor from September 1953 as compared to April 1954 is $139,878.73. That's just the figures I gave you from this other letter. A similar comparison of 6 of the larger departments not under the jurisdiction of the government increased salaries $170,000. That's just what I told you. Total increased salaries during the same period of all state departments are shown as follows. September 1953, $5,467.
I'm sorry.
I'll continue it in a minute. I'll give you all the figures of it.
All right, you
Will
were
the moderator look at these telegrams and be sure that I haven't misrepresented what they contain, such as the acting governor implied just then?
Aren't you really talking about 2 different things?
You want a collaboration of a figure here?
No, he said I didn't read all of the telegram and proceeded to quote something else there which is not in my telegrams, and I just didn't want anybody in this audience to feel that I was misrepresenting something.
Since I brought this question up, may I point out that the acting governor is talking about departments directly under his control, and you're talking about total state payroll. Now, I imagine the decision as to whether or not his activities have influenced the entire state payroll. Is that right?
That's right, Dr. Larson. Leroy's gone all over the state of Florida, leaving an impression of the people of this state that I have raised padded payrolls, like he says, to the tune of these figures. which he first started out with, $452,000, and now he's raised it up to $650,000. And I have authentic proof here from Mr. Higgins that is not correct. So,
Approve of that type of tactic in a political campaign?
well, Senator, is that the kind of campaign I've been carrying on in the past? You've been carrying on that kind of
I'm
campaign,
showing you the
Senator.
kind you're carrying on now, sir.
Now, what your engineers have done is to revise those plans and specifications to make that a great deal more elaborate project and to run the cost up some $25 million. For example, it has been freely stated, and I've seen it in print, and I haven't heard it denied, and I'm sure it's the truth, that they took the three service areas, that is, the areas along the Bobtail Turnpike where the people would turn off to get gasoline and get a sandwich and make a rest stop. And in the McCarty engineer's proposal, those were provided at a cost of $510,000, which sounds like a pretty good-sized layout for that sort of thing. But in the new engineer's redraft of the plans and specifications, well, the cost of those service areas has gone up to $3,600,000. And I say that's the sort of thing that's unjustified.
All right, a comment from Acting Governor Johns, and we'll move on.
They have revised the plan somewhat. They're making a wider road, and they're making a thicker road. And they're building the turnpike, according to my understanding, where the people, we're going to have high-level bridges, because you all had these here low drawbridges in there that, like we have here in Miami, that disrupts traffic, and everybody's tied up when they want to go home and they want to get to the work. Well, this new Turnpike Authority, they are building high-level bridges where the people can continue to travel, because we feel like when you pay that toll, you want to get to your destination. And that's one thing that's run up the cost. It's a number of things that's run up the cost. But just like I've just told you, the cost of it will be declared at the bidding table whenever the bids are let.
All right, let's move on to another issue now. Bill, another issue?
No, the same one. The conversation sort of, the question ricocheted off between the two of you, Mr. Johns. You didn't say whether you would favor the full-length Turnpike as governor. You will try to complete that as governor.
Oh, there's no question about it. With this here Inter-American Cultural Center down here that I'm fighting to get for the people of this state, that's going to employ around 20,000 people and bring in $500 million to Florida, we're going to have a full-length turnpike. And Marvin Adams, the chairman of the Turnpike Commission, he's been conferring with other turnpike commissioners all over the country. They're planning a turnpike from Maine to Florida and one from California to Florida. And it's going to be the only answer to our traffic problems in this state, not only this state, but every other state.
All right, that gets an answer from both participants. And Don, do you have a question?
I have a question about the future, Ralph. Subject to the succession to the governorship has been raised a number of times. I would like to ask each gentleman, have you supported a law for succession by an official elected by the people on a statewide basis, such as the Secretary of State? And would you give active leadership to an amendment providing for a lieutenant governor?
And we'll start with Acting Governor Johns.
That's another thing that I'm going to put in my message. And recommend that, I don't know what the legislature wants, whether they want the Secretary of State to be a successor or whether they want to have a lieutenant governor in this state. But that's one thing that I'm going to put in my message, ask them to either make the Secretary of State the lieutenant governor or let the people elect one. Now, I know Senator Collins is going to say that I helped defeat that bill last session legislature, which is absolutely right. Because I was representing, just like I say, I've been representing the 15th Senatorial District in the legislature. But just like I say that I'm acting governor of this state, now I'm representing all Florida.
First thing I want to say is that I'm happy that you admit that the present system is wrong. I think that's a rather significant admission on your part. And I want to say, too, that I think it was completely unjustified in the last session that when the proposals were made, I think there were 3 different bills that were presented to the legislature to provide for letting the people vote on whether they would have a lieutenant governor or not, that the first one you sent to 2 committees, and the next one you sent to 3 committees, and the last one you sent to 4 committees, and you were just making it very sure that the members of the legislature wouldn't even have a chance to submit even that proposal to the people of this state. But I favor a lieutenant governor. I favor that lieutenant governor be the presiding officer of the Senate. And I submit that will provide far-reaching and great reform for the government of this state. And as governor, I'm going to give strong and active and effective leadership to accomplish that reform for the people of this state. It's not going to be just recommended to the legislature. Every bit of power and influence that I have will be devoted to try to bring that reform about. Before this program is over, I want to be sure and ask the acting governor about this Ku Klux Klan thing that I know the people of this whole state want to hear some expression from him about. Can I ask him now?
Well, you have 47 minutes left in your time.
47 seconds.
47 minutes.
47 seconds. Well, acting
That's my
governor,
mistake.
we had a bill down there to provide for the dehooding and the unmasking of the Ku Klux Klan. I co-sponsored that bill and, of course, voted for it. You voted against it. You sided with the Ku Klux and against those of us who were trying to protect the people from the menace of the Ku Klux Klan. Since that time, you've made 4 different statements about why you took that position. One occasion, your administrative assistant, a man on your payroll, it was stated that you voted against it because it didn't go far enough and you wanted a stronger bill, which was a perfectly ridiculous statement. When you were called upon to make an expression in Orlando, you said...
All right, Acting Governor Jones.
Leroy, that is right. I voted against that bill, and I have answered it at least 15 or 20 times on the stump and through the press. So let's just say to the people of Florida, I made a mistake. Of course, you've never made any mistake. But I just want to show the people of Florida a handbill that you've got out here just before the campaign, just 2 or 3 days before the campaign, and I want them to look at it. I just want to hold it up here now, and I want you to put the camera on it.
Well, I want you to point out anything in that handbill is not true.
And I want to point out here, it says Charlie John fought heart and soul for the Ku Klux Klan.
Wasn't that true?
Well, I merely voted, Senator, and I'm telling you that I made a mistake. I'm admitting it publicly to all South Florida and all Florida. And here you say Charlie and John Hart fought heart and soul to deny the colored people the right to vote. Well, do you know what that bill was? Senator, it was a bill to repeal all election laws, to deny me the right to vote, you the right to vote, to Republicans the right to vote, and everybody the right to vote. And if we could have passed that bill and repeal all those, then we was coming in there with a decent piece of legislation, just like we passed in 1951, that we thought we was going to try to clean up these election laws for the people of this state and have clean, decent reform in our election laws, Senator, that you used in the last minutes of this campaign in Miami Beach and in the colored section of this state where you thought it would hurt me. You didn't carry this out in North and West Florida, just in the colored section where you thought it would hurt Charlie John.
I think
I didn't think that you would stoop to that kind of tactic.
Let's hear from Senator Collins.
I didn't stoop near as low there, my good friend, as you did in the advertisement that I showed at the commencement of this program. There's not a thing in the world on that's not true. That is basically true. Now, I didn't have that. That was printed here in Miami. It was printed by our local office. That's true. And I don't deny it was printed and distributed, and there's not a thing in the world on that's not true. And not a thing in the world on that's not borne out by the record. There were 2 bills. One to dehood and to unmask the Ku Klux Klan, which you opposed.
I voted against it.
And
I admit that
all right, you admitted that you made a mistake. I've said numerous times that I've made mistakes over the years. But it's true nevertheless, and it's a part of your public record, and it's a proper subject of discussion, and it's a proper subject of representation to the people as to how you stood. The other bill was the so-called white supremacy bill that would have denied the right of the colored people to vote. And
Senator, you're wrong. That there bill was just to repeal all of our election laws, and you know it.
All right, gentlemen, our time is up.
Wait, now, I've got the right, Ralph, to reply to
we
the
have
Senator.
30 seconds before we go off the air, Acting Governor John.
And I'd like to ask
That bill was to take away from the law and under the law the Democratic primary.
Governor, any statement?
Well, I just want to say to the television audience that I'm mighty happy to have this opportunity of discussing the issues in this campaign and let the people know my side of the question. I'm mighty happy the wonderful vote that I received in the first primary. And I believe that I'm going to receive a still better vote in the second primary because I feel like the citizens of Florida approve of the kind of administration that I am giving them, a progressive administration, a business administration. And I'm proud of the title that the people of Florida have given me, and that's the Action Governor of Florida. And I'm going to continue to give the people the kind of administration that I feel they're entitled to. And the people of Florida realize and they know the kind of campaign that I conducted all through the first primary. And that's the kind of campaign I'm going to continue to conduct.
Afraid that's it. We want to thank Senator Leroy Collins and Acting Governor Charlie Johns for being our guest
I'd like for you to
tonight.
invite us back on this program. I've tried. I went on.
Will you come back on the program again,
I wanted to be
Senator?
on a Hallandale station up there, but the senator wouldn't.
How about a week from tonight? We'll carry it on next Thursday night at the same time. We'd be willing.
What about it, Senator?
I don't know what my plans are, but I'll be glad if you want to start in the morning with me. I start in at Sarasota making speeches on the stump.
Well, let's see if we can make it a week from tonight.
Go along
That's
with me.
what I've been doing all
We'll be
the
happy to
time
make it.
because you was campaigning at least 60 days before I.
Thank you, gentlemen. A final reminder to the people to vote on the 25th of May. This is Ralph Rennick saying a good night.
Tonight's What's the Story program was originated by WTVJ and carried by radio stations throughout the entire state of Florida. The program was presented as a public service of television station WTVJ in Miami, Florida. Produced and moderated by Ralph Rennick, the program was directed by Lloyd Gaines.